What's up, man? This is Immortal Technique, Harlem, New York. Right now, you're watching Music Connection magazine, live in LA, baby. What's up, man? My name is Immortal Technique from Harlem, New York. Be out here in Inglewood. Right now, we in House of Blues, chilling on the People's Champions Tour. Myself, Talib Kweli, Chino XL, Hassan Salam, Constant Flow, Poison Pen, Nico is, DJ Static, DJ Schematics. Whole squad is out here. I have a new album coming out called The Middle Passage, which hopefully will be out at the end of the year. And so far, it's just a blessing to be out here. You know, I make very hardcore, revolutionary hip hop music. You know what I mean? It's interesting because even though the subject matter that I have has things like murder, rape, torture, gang violence, you know, insanity, all sorts of very difficult subjects, I remind people it's not gratuitous violence, you know, it's not for no reason. There's always a context for it, there's always an explanation. Like if we talk about the world and how people interpret it now, you know, you can draw correlations to things that people have been through. Like if we want to talk about how we're scared of ISIS because they stole people's land and they are forcibly converting people, in other words, forcing them to change a religion. Well, gee, who the fuck does that remind you of, huh? How do you think you got this country? You stole somebody's land and you made indigenous people change their religion from that to Christianity. Then you stole African people, some of which who were already traveling back and forth here, and then you made sure that they changed their religion as well. Not to say that, you know, Christianity is a white man's religion, because it has its origins in East Africa and the Middle East. So, I mean, that goes without saying. But it's just like I put all of this stuff out here so that people will have a context to it. Because I always remember that Malcolm X quote, as long as you can be convinced you never did anything, you can never do anything, you know. And our indigenous people have a very rich history. You know, African people have a very rich history. And they were not introduced to each other as slaves. You know, it's important that we acknowledge that.
How'd you get your name, Immortal Techniques?
Well, Immortal Technique is a name that, first I just battled this technique because I felt like Immortal Technique was just going to be too long. But it was always that. I always felt like to do anything in life, you need skill, you need technique, you need the ability to do it. But I always felt like we have a deeper connection as human beings, you know, to our surroundings, to the earth, to each other, and that's the spirit. So the spirit is immortal. That's basically the premise, Immortal Technique. So the spirit will outlive everything else and will come back again, and hopefully come at a time in which it's needed the most, you know, which is probably now because things are pretty fucked up.
That's what's up. What's up? What keeps you motivated and what keeps you inspired to make music?
For those that don't know, I was incarcerated when I was young. I went to prison, just became a teenager. And to me, that doesn't give me the right to brag about it. It gives me the responsibility to educate young brothers and sisters that that's not a rite of passage. That's just slavery. You know, when you're a ward of the state, that means you're a property of the state. That's why they call him the warden when you're in prison. So what keeps me inspired is actually the work I do with incarcerated youth, with immigrant youth that has been demonized and persecuted. And those children inspire me, to be honest, because they're braver than a lot of motherfuckers out there. You know, they don't have papers and they're going to Congress and tell people, you know, how can you act like all of your ancestors came here legally? How can you sit here and rationalize and justify you taking land and you killing people and you breaking treaties, and then you want to hold other people to a different standard? Why is it okay for you to rewrite history when you feel like your people are demonized? But when it comes to us even trying to learn our history, you want to block it in Arizona. You want to make it seem as if we were never here. You know, what struck me is one time I was reading an article about these artifacts that were found in South Africa, right? And they were carbon dated to about 1,200 years ago. And people were looking at them and they were astounded because the white Afrikaner people had to carbon date them 10 times. And when they asked them, why'd you carbon date them 10 times? It's because they were astounded that black people had been there before white people. I mean, you're laughing and you're smiling, but I mean, this is how they were brainwashed when they were young by their racist, apartheid,
of course,
white supremacist society. It told them, you guys got here around the same time, so you both have claim to this land. No, there were people here for thousands of years, and this civilization was set up here 1,200 years ago, one of many civilizations that existed in Africa. And I think that kind of replays itself throughout the course of the way we see modern people's minds colonized. So part of my responsibility is to introduce people to a different brand of music that's not just all about, I mean, I like to have fun, sure, I like to dance. I'll listen to stuff that just has a hot beat once in a while, but it can't just be that. You know what I mean? Everybody likes postre, but you need something else in your stomach besides postre, right? If you're just eating flan, dude, how long are you going to survive? You know, right? Everybody likes steak, but you can't just have steak. You know what I mean? So we're the fruits and vegetables. You know what I mean? We are the good things. The cilantro, the ayahuasca. Sometimes they go on a trip. You know what I mean? So I tell people that the music that we make is definitely inspired by those young people that I see when I go and teach in prisons, when I go and work with youth that are persecuted because of their immigration status. The bravery of those children. Because when you see them, it's something I noticed. I did a program in East Lake Juvenile Hall, and one of the things that really struck me is that working with all these kids showed me that they're so fucking smart. Like, they have such a vivid imagination. You know, they're really, really intelligent. It's just that they don't have a disposable income to have $10,000 put up for their bail. Who the fuck has that in the hood like that unless you're really getting it? You know, so imagine someone who's on Section 8. Imagine someone who's in NY on Section 8 housing. Your rent's $300 a month. And they telling you, yo, you know, you got to put up $3,000 to get your kid out. They're looking at it like 10 months? Like, what? How am I going to do? That's a year's rent for how am I going to get my kid out? It's just not feasible for them. So when people talk about convicts, or these are the convicts, the felons, all right, why don't you call them what they really are? They're just poor people that don't have the benefit of structure, that don't have the benefit of an attorney that can get them to fuck off for what they did. Because everybody breaks the law 2 times a day at least, but they decide who they enforce it on.
That's right. That's right. When can we expect the Middle Passage album?
I mean, I got a lot of producers on there. I got DJ Premier. I got Scram Jones, my dude Southpaw. Ninth Wonder is on there. Ali Shaheed Muhammad, Tribe Called Quest, did some monster shit for me. And then Tom Morello co-produced something on there. So it's been an amazing journey for me to discover, and I want to break down a lot of barriers that I feel are still up. You know, like coming from an East Coast experience, being mostly Peruvian, but being that my mother's black from the father's side, I always grew up with an understanding and a love for both indigenous and to never be ashamed of African culture. And I think what I like to bring here to the West Coast is hopefully bringing those communities that have been separated closer together, you know, because those people have a lot more in common than they do apart. And the things that keep them apart are people that want to keep us divided. That colonial European Spanish mentality that says, oh, well, those, you know, you might be a dirty Indian, but at least you're not a Negro. That's some 1622 shit when you were in chains, dude. Don't subscribe to that. Don't think the first time indigenous and an African person met was in the bottom of a boat. And at the same time, I tell black people, don't fall for that okie doke right-wing lie where they go and tell you, oh, these Mexicans are taking your jobs. You gotta protect America. They're not worried about protecting you. Don't let them fool you. Think about protecting America. Mm-hmm. You saw we're about to perform in Mesa, Arizona. There was a guy, a neo-Nazi, straight up Aryan Brotherhood, swastikas all over him. He shot 6 people. He got tased, right? Little black kid steals from a fucking store, and he's gunned down. Mm-hmm. Judge, jury, and execution.
Mm-hmm. Playing with a toy gun and shit.
The Mexican guy has his hands up in Washington. And I seen it. He gets blasted. Oscar Grant on the floor, mm-hmm. hands behind his back. Boom.
Yeah.
You know? And the sad part is that, I'll close with this, that they get murdered twice. Right? Our people get murdered twice. The first time by the system, and the second time by the media. Mm-hmm. Because they always come up with some show, you know.
He's a thug.
Trayvon used to cut class.
He used to smoke weed, kill him.
He used to smoke weed, or mm-hmm. or this other guy, you know what, he stole something, you know, back in 2004. You know, first of all, that was 11 years ago. And if we want to talk about justifying things because people stole something, then imagine how many politicians out there have stole something from you in your pocket, stolen from this government. Does that mean that we can just execute them? I mean, I'm going to talk about this on stage because it's necessary. But, you know, that's the basic gist of what we do. And if you never heard of me before and this is your first time ever seeing me, then do me a favor. Just go steal all my music offline. Give a fuck. And if you like what you hear, then support me at viperrecords.com. Immortal Technique, Harlem, New York.
That's what's up.
LA, baby.